I am not going to repeat where we are and what we are doing because I have said this so many times for these recordings, but I am very happy to introduce our new guest here with this wonderful white wall on the background. We have the nicest person here. It's Lindsi Маккенна, who is with TAG and TB Cup. So thank you for finding the time in your extremely intense schedule.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm thrilled to be chatting.
Is it your first time in Paris?
No, I've been here before,
Do you
but
like
like
it?
in 2013.
Okay.
Do I like it?
Do you like it?
Oh, it's been raining the whole time we're here, but yeah, it's okay. It's good. It's nice.
All right. How is the weather in New York where you're based?
Also raining.
Raining?
Yeah.
Okay. So not too much of a difference. Not yet snowing?
No, not yet. Not
All
yet.
right. So let's start with just the basic things. Can you tell us a little bit about TAG and what are you guys doing in the world of TB, just in case there are some new people who did not know about the fact that you are kind of the leading.
Yes. So TAG stands for Treatment Action Group. It's a research and policy advocacy organization, basically an activist group that was formed 30 years ago. It was born out of ACT UP and the ACT UP movement. And it was the Treatment and Data Committee that spun off and formed TAG. And at the time, they were doing a lot of inside-outside strategy work with the US government around the development and introduction of HIV medications. And then about 20 years ago, Treatment Action Group started working on tuberculosis because they realized as they were scaling up access to ART, both domestically and globally, people were dying of TB. So they were getting on HIV treatment only to die of TB, and realized that Treatment Action Campaign in South Africa actually made them realize that TAG needed to start working on TB as well. So we started doing that 20 years ago. And 10 years ago, we founded the Global TB Community Advisory Board, which Dennis has been a member of. And it's a group of kind of research literate activists from around the world who are engaging with drug, diagnostics, vaccines, sponsors, and really trying to move the needle in terms of community engagement and research and access to what comes out of those efforts.
All right. What other diseases you guys are focusing on? TB, HIV, anything else?
Yes, TAG also works on hepatitis C. So we have the three programs: HIV, tuberculosis, and hepatitis C. So HIV and the two of the leading comorbidities among people living with HIV.
And what are the main sort of products or directions of work other than CABs?
Yeah.
I mean, because people are familiar with the idea of negotiating with pharmaceuticals, trying to advocate for the price reductions and early access and stuff, but other things?
Yeah, so we organize the rest of our work kind of into three buckets. One is trying to increase investments in TB research and development, so advocating for governments to put more money into research to help drive innovation. The second bucket is related to helping then influence the research agenda. So making sure what the governments are spending on research is high quality, it's needs driven, it matches community priority, and is going to really affect change and have the maximum impact on the epidemics we work on. And then the third bucket is working on making sure that whatever comes out of research is accessible to people who need it. So access to innovation under the frame of the right to science and to benefit from scientific progress.
Don't be surprised that I'm asking this question, because I'm going to ask it from the point of view of the person who maybe just joined the movement, or somebody who is like working in the field, consulting people, and not really know still or don't understand. How do people with no medical background, not being doctors, not being scientists, how can they impact things like clinical trials? When you look at the clinical trial protocol, it is extremely hard to understand. What are the words in it? Is it English? Is it Russian? Which language is it? What's the sense of it? And is anybody even listening, really?
Yeah, I think it's a skill that's kind of honed over time, but I think community people are the best people to be looking at those documents, because they're ultimately going to be the end user of whatever comes out of that research. And they know their community, cultural, local context better often than the researchers who are writing those protocols at the more global level, right?
Okay.
So I think it's a skill that's built over time. I think, TAG has developed a lot of resources with the mind of trying to train people who don't have this background in, medicine or science, people who are community activists, to understand science and feel empowered to be able to engage with these types of protocols. We've developed an activist guide to protocol review, which kind of takes you through the key sections. It helps you see through the noise. Like there's a lot of jargon in the protocols, words that are not familiar, lab values that you don't know what it means. But some of that, all of it's important, but there are key parts of the protocol that communities can have a big impact on. And so the resources we've developed help you kind of see through the noise and focus on the main points of protocol where community activists can maybe have the biggest impact in terms of their input. And I think, it has changed over time. I think researchers have really started to see the value of community input. And so in the past, when it was harder to get them to listen and incorporate what we're saying, I think now they've really kind of turned a corner in terms of understanding the benefit community input can bring, because they've seen how slowly the last generation of TB innovations, drugs, diagnostics have been taken up. And I think they realized that if they had engaged communities earlier, maybe we'd be in a different place with those things.
Okay. Speaking about the progress, okay, scientists have come a long way, and like TB, we hear a lot of exciting news at this conference and recently, like NTB results and others. Like, what do you think what is the global picture? Are we getting there? Are we getting TB defeated or not? And if you know, what do you think of the Eastern Europe and Central Asia with this regard at this picture?
Yeah, I think in terms of the research, we're getting there. I think in the last 10 years, there's been a revolution in terms of the tools we have. So we have been doing a lot of work under the banner of the 146 by 24 campaign. The 1 stands for shorter regimens for TB preventive treatment, the 4 is shorter regimens for drug-sensitive TB, and the 6 is shorter regimens for drug-resistant TB. So we've seen tremendous advances in terms of the regimens we have across the spectrum. We have much more effective, much safer, much more tolerable regimens than we did before. In diagnostics, there's also been a major revolution, and there's a second one coming, because there has been, I think, from COVID-19, a lot of investment and appetite from diagnostics companies now to try to modify their platforms and assays to serve the TB market. And so I think we've made a lot of progress. We're finally seeing TB vaccine studies taking off, right? And more investment in vaccines than we've ever seen before. So I think on the research and innovation side, like we're getting there. Where I think we're falling really short is on the other end of the spectrum, right? Like we're seeing that programs are really slow to take these things up. And that's because they're under-resourced. Global Fund, only 18% of their portfolio goes to TB, right? Meanwhile, if you look at the burden and the need, much more money should be going to TB. Domestic financing, countries are not putting enough money into their TB programs, and they're not doing it in a way that's consultative with communities. And so we're seeing this divide where the research, I think a lot of good stuff is happening, but it's not being taken up because we're not closing the loop and finishing through communities and funding to make sure it's taken up. And we're seeing some transitions away from donors. So we're seeing Global Fund forcing countries, especially in the region in which you work, to co-finance. But then what happens, right? So I think that that's where we're falling short and where there needs to be a lot more attention.
Does it mean that the focus for activists should shift from pharma to governments because we are there in terms of access, or not really?
I think it's a balance, right? Like I think everyone could be doing more. I think activists have, done a lot to pressure pharma, especially in TB in the last couple of years. And we've had some wins, right? Like it's not perfect, but even recently we've seen the price of bedaquiline come down. We now have a drug-resistant TB regimen under $500. That was the MSF target. Could it come down further? Do we want it to? Yes, of course. We've seen gene expert test pricing come down, at least for the TB and rifampicin resistance testing. We want the rest of their suite of products to come down as well, right? So I think there's still room for pressure on pharma, specifically on Cepheid and the diagnostics companies. But I do think that we should 100% be paying more attention to our governments and pushing them to really invest in TV, because without that, we're never going to be able to implement these. Even if Farmer reduces all their prices, we're not going to be able to implement them at scale if governments are not invested in doing so.
So many questions here, and I'm trying to decide which direction to go. Let's unfold the Cepheid example to start with. So, all right, we all have demanded the $5 price. We got $8 price, and Cepheid claims, Danaher claims that this is at no cost. I want to talk about a different thing. I have heard from people at this conference, and I'm sure that some people who are going to watch it will think the same. They would say, okay, you have demanded the price reduction. You got some. Isn't it the time to stop and say, thank you very much for this, and then like shift your focus for something else, right? And instead of at the very same moment when these people were so generous and started to sell this at no cost, and they had so many investments in this product, why you just at the very same day you start saying like, okay, but you forgot to reduce the price to X. You're so ungrateful. Why are you doing this to them?
I mean, I think to be an activist is to be dissatisfied. Like, the whole point is to keep pushing. But I also think that, like, it's very generous of other people to accept that Cepheid is saying this price is at cost before we've seen their cost of goods. Like, I don't believe, especially, you know, we've spent the last decade trying to get them to reduce the price with no effort.
Yep.
They haven't done much to build relationships with communities. They haven't responded to our letters until very recently, right? And so I think that it's only natural that we should be skeptical and want more. So until we see proof that this is at cost, I'm gonna believe the evidence base we do have, which is the MSF analysis that says it costs them only less than $5. So until we see that proof, I think we should continue to push. And to be fair, you know, they didn't meet the demand. It's not a $5 test.
All right, all right. With regards to bedaquiline, what do you think of this price reduction, and where do we have to go next with regard to bedaquiline? Do we shift to delamide or pretamide, or do we keep pushing for bedaquiline as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for me, what's even more exciting, like I think that the price reduction we've seen down to $130 per 6-month treatment course is really exciting. That's a 55% reduction, right? But for me, what was more exciting was what followed that, which was J&J's commitment not to enforce any of its secondary patents on bedaquiline. I think that's an important precedent. I think that that opens up opportunity for generics, including especially in ICA, which many countries were left out of the deal that preceded that, right? So I think that we're in a good place in terms of bedaquiline. I think now the next step is generics. You know, some of them have WHO pre-qualification, which is good, but in order for those generics to compete in a place like South Africa, they have to be registered there. So it's not done, the job's not done, right? And we need activists to be pushing where registration is required for those generics to be available. But I do think that with the results presented at this conference, which maybe you'll talk about in another video, we have these NTB regimens that include delamide. And there are a lot of regimens in development that also include delamide as part of the backbone.
Okay.
There's also studies looking at delamide as TB preventive treatment for household contacts of MDR-TB. And so I think this is a drug that has been really tricky. The price has always been really high. Even recently, they reduced the price, but it's still over $1,000 per 6-month treatment course, right? So I think we need to be looking at some of these other drugs that are important, that have received less attention, because I think, you know, WHO guidelines may be updated in the next year and may change the position of that drug and its relative importance. And we haven't been working on it as a community, right? We haven't really been putting pressure on Otsuka the last couple of years, and Viatris, who has a voluntary license from them, because uptake of delamide has been limited by its limited indication within the guidelines. But that's going to change, I think.
Yeah, all right. That's a perfect explanation. I think like we can just cut it and take as an instruction. What should we do next? Then just like a Reels. What's the name of it? Reels in Instagram or?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with that, so I'm too old. What has disappointed you the most so far in the world of TB with all the things happening? What was the biggest disappointment that comes to your mind immediately when I ask it?
Something that has been really frustrating for me is the 4-month regimen. Before we mentioned like 146 by 24.
Yeah.
The 4 is a 4-month regimen for drug-sensitive TB, and there has been like no uptake of this. And I think for a couple of reasons, like there's not a fixed dose combination yet of this 4-month regimen. It includes rifapentine and moxifloxacin. So there's no fixed dose combination. It's expensive because of the rifapentine. So it's 4 times what a regular treatment course would be for drug-sensitive TB, $46 versus over 200. And I think those are the primary reasons why it hasn't been taken up. But we've also heard that, you know, some programs are saying, oh, well, like 4 months isn't that much shorter than 6 months. So if people can stay on treatment for 4 months, they're going to stay on it for the last 2 months, right? So they are saying like, oh, it's not a good enough advance. But we spent like 50 years trying to shorten treatment for drug-sensitive TB. And now we finally did. And 2 months, actually 2 months is meaningful in a lot of ways for, I think, people affected by TB, right? You get back to like your life sooner, you go back to work sooner, or school. Like I think that 2 months, we need to translate that for people who, in governments and programs who seem disinterested in this regimen, because for me, it's been frustrating that for so long we've called to shorten treatment. We've tried so hard. We finally have done it, and it seems like there's no interest in it now. You know, and it's being driven by these things that can change. Like an FDC can be made, but people have to want it. Governments have to demand it, and no one's doing that. And then the price can change, right? If people take it up. And so it's like a chicken egg issue that we're caught in, where donors say, oh, countries aren't interested, and countries say, oh, no donors are helping support this thing. And so you're just stuck. So for me, that's been really disappointing, to not see any interest or uptake of that.
What do you think should be done to change that?
I think that there needs to be demand generation work. I think we need a couple of countries who want to do it, who are excited to put it into their Global Fund grant to say, we're going to do introduction. You know, Global Fund has this new next generation market shaping strategy where they have these strategic initiatives for introducing innovation, and that requires market shaping, which this would be a perfect candidate for. So I think that, you know, government should think about how to introduce this, because we need someone to move. It's a game of chicken and egg issue, and a game of chicken, and I feel like government should move first.
Do you feel like there are any champions in the world who can try to do that in terms of countries?
Yeah, I mean, I think there have been certain countries that have said they're interested in doing it in like a more limited way, like under operational research setting.
For example?
I think, I don't have good examples, but I have like a list of countries that I can share with you later. But I think that there were some countries that like came out in front and were supportive of 146 by 24, which 4 is a 4, and that included Georgia and Ukraine in your region.
All right.
So I think that that could be a good starting place. And I think also from like your network in the region, it'd be interesting to hear if community activists are excited about a 4-month regimen, and if like there's interest there, because I feel like it needs to come from the ground up often.
Yeah, that's good enough. I think these 2 countries are the perfect example for the region to understand the context. On the contrary, what do you think are the biggest successes? What excites you the most? Maybe of things that you didn't yet mention?
Yeah, I think the things that excite me most are that there is a growing network of community groups and community folks that are interested in building their capacity to work on the whole pipeline, like from research all the way through to policy translation and uptake. So seeing regional cabs, including through Smart for TB, coming online, like for me, that has been really exciting. Yeah, to like expand the cabs and community groups that we're able to work with has been very nice.
Yeah, good to hear. Yeah, and we have been promising to release, we're keen to do the TB procurement analysis reports for like 3 years, and we're finally getting there. And the first one is going to be published probably by the time when this video will be released. there will be a report.
Yay!
So yeah, we're getting there as well, together with the rest of the world. The last question, it's about activism, obviously, because you are an amazing activist, and TAG comes from like the very beginning of access activism. For you, what do you feel like? What does it take to be a good activist?
For me, I think it's a mix of being impatient, but also knowing that things can take a long time and not the path you think they're going to take to change. Like, I think to be a good activist, you have to be impatient and unhappy and dissatisfied with where things are, but you also, I think, have to play the long game in some ways when you're thinking about how to change things from both an inside and an outside strategy. And I also think you have to be good at paperwork.
Yeah, something that doesn't necessarily come to mind to most of the people, but it is.
I mean, it's true. Like, there's no revolution without a little paperwork. So I think that it's important.
How long have you been doing this?
I'm celebrating my 11th year at TAG.
Yay, that's cool.
Yeah.
We're not going to reveal your age.
Thank God.
I joined when I was 16.
I'm 34.
Yeah, I think that was a brilliant answer.
Do you agree? I mean, do you feel the same?
No, I said that like with regard to paperwork, I got like super excited, and you don't get it much, and you feel like you're the only one understanding the importance of writing this whole thing down. All right, Lindsi, thank you so much for your time, and I really appreciate you coming. It was super amazing to have you here, and please, everybody, be like Lindsi.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. See you guys. Bye-bye.